This is CBC Vancouver News.
A carjacking at gunpoint in Surrey ends with a stolen vehicle crashing with a police cruiser and an officer injured. Also,
it was looking pretty dire there for a while, but you know, winter always comes around eventually.
Elation on the slopes, but the province is putting out a weather warning as a blast of winter heads straight for the south coast. And
we even tried mediation, but we didn't have any success there.
Another transit strike is bubbling up, with bus operations supervisors starting job action in Metro Vancouver and warning it will affect riders. Good evening, I'm Tanya Fletcher. Thanks for joining us. We begin in Surrey, where a carjacking at gunpoint has ended in a crash, leaving a suspect and a police officer injured. It started around 3:30 this afternoon near 192nd Street and 76th Avenue. RCMP say the stolen vehicle collided with a Langley police cruiser. The suspects, it's unclear how many, took off running but were eventually tracked down by officers. One suspect was taken to the hospital and treated for a minor bite from a police dog. A police officer was also hospitalized with injuries. Investigators say they will be on scene throughout the night, with more information expected to be released tomorrow. A weather warning tonight from the province. Drivers are being urged to be extra careful with snow possible for the lower mainland by morning. It's part of a series of winter storms taking direct aim at the south coast, starting overnight as a blast of Arctic air moves in. Snowfall warnings are in place for Howe Sound, Whistler, and the eastern parts of the Fraser Valley. That could see up to 15 centimeters of snow. Some 20 other special weather statements warn of snow, rain, and strong winds across much of Vancouver Island, Metro Vancouver, and the Central Coast. Dry BC also warns of highway advisories, with the mountain passes expecting heavy accumulations of snow starting tomorrow. Well, meanwhile, the North Shore Mountains have finally seen a dump of fresh snow, as Saurabh Sandhu is finding out. Skiers and snowboarders alike say it's better late than never.
Chris Chow and his family are season pass holders at Mount Seymour Park. For the last few days, they have been eagerly monitoring the webcams at the park for signs of snow.
You looked at the cameras and there was gravel on the grounds, and you could see the rocks poking through it.
But that changed on Friday when the park received a fresh dump of snow.
We've had over 64 centimeters of snowfall in 3 days, bringing our settled snow depth up to about 60 centimeters.
It was almost like overnight, it was like winter. My wife quickly jumped on the booking site and booked our 4-hour time slot.
And many others made the most of the opportunity.
Stoked, so stoked. Like, happy it's here. I have stuff to do now. Good times.
I hope we're getting more, because some are not open yet, so yes, it's really exciting.
It was looking pretty dire there for a while, but you know, winter always comes around eventually.
A warm start to the winter and the lack of snow left many in the skiing community disappointed, taking some charm of the holiday season this year. With more snow in forecast, snow enthusiasts are once again lining up at local ski hills. Staff at Mount Seymour Park say they're confident of catching up after a late start to the season.
We've seen the turning point now for winter. This should be good for the full winter ahead. I think the good news is we've got 3 months in front of us of the season.
Things are looking better for other local ski hills as well, with Grouse and Cypress Mountains reporting close to 50 centimeters of snow in the last 48 hours. Environment Canada is forecasting more winter weather for the region later this week, with potential for snow on higher elevations. Saurabh Sandhu, CBC News, North Vancouver.
Nearly 200 bus operations supervisors within the Metro Vancouver transit system have triggered job action this weekend. As of yesterday, supervisors overseeing everything from engineering to transit communications began refusing overtime. As Janella Hamilton reports, the union says it will affect bus service for riders, especially as students go back to school after the holiday break.
Chloe Fike says getting to UBC on the 99B line is already a headache with daily delays and packed buses. And she worries it may worsen with the latest transit strike coinciding with classes resuming after the holiday break.
I take the 99 like at least 3 to 4 times a week. So yeah, that's concerning.
As of Saturday, Metro Vancouver bus operations supervisors started job action with an overtime ban. The union says it was a last resort after talks with their employer, Coast Mountain Bus Company, broke down.
Once we got to our key issues, which is fair wages and excessive workload issues, it was pretty clear the employer didn't want to deal with those issues. We even tried mediation. But we didn't have any success there.
In a statement, Coast Mountain Bus Company says it is monitoring the job action and it does not expect the overtime ban to have significant impact on transit services. However, the union says busy bus routes like the 99 and rapid buses will be affected, and that has some riders concerned.
There will be no other option, so I will have to maybe take a cab or I will have to pay like much as compared to this.
Especially in Surrey, they often get delayed, and with the increase in population recently, people hardly find spot on the buses and they have to wait for 1 or 2 buses, which makes it even harder when there's a bus strike.
Coast Mountain is urging striking workers to return to the bargaining table with what it calls realistic expectations. But if the impasse continues, the union says job action could escalate to the point of shutting down all bus services. It comes at a time when TransLink is looking to expand exponentially in the coming years. But the union says Coast Mountain has so far refused to ramp up staffing levels.
If they can't get the staffing levels where they need to be today, we can only imagine in the future how bad it's going to be.
The last collective agreement expired in October 2022. Janella Hamilton, CBC News, Vancouver.
The search has ended for a helicopter that went missing mid-flight Friday. The pilot, the only person on board, was also found dead today. The chopper had taken off from Calgary, headed for Sicamous. The wreckage was found around noon today, east of Revelstoke, just off the Trans-Canada Highway. Search and rescue crews had received a ping from an emergency locator transmitter in the area. We often hear about the problems facing BC Ferries, but a new report from Washington State Ferries suggests it's also dealing with similar challenges. It says the company will not be able to operate at full service for the next 4 to 5 years, in part because of aging vessels and an international marine worker shortage.
There probably should have been some investment in the past that wasn't done. That's led us to people aging out and not having enough backfill, and that's investment in both the vessels themselves. You look on the coast here, you have vessels from the 60s and 70s still running, and then you look at the workforce as well. There's people with 30 to 45 years working at BC Ferries.
Worker retention and competitive wages could also be at play as BC Ferries faces similar struggles. Real estate experts are warning of a worrying trend in Canada. With high interest rates and a market showing signs of cooling down, more buyers are walking away from pre-sale deposits. The CBC's Yvette Bren spoke with one man who lost his family's savings and his dreams of a new home.
Sudeep Sebergal reads over the contract for his first Canadian home that ended in tears.
On the closing date, 31st July, I went and wept in the street side office.
He put down nearly $82,000 as a deposit on a pre-sale townhome, but when he couldn't sell his home in New Delhi, he couldn't afford to close.
Despite my best efforts, I was not able to sell it off. And then unexpectedly, we had floods in Delhi, and it just made everything very complicated.
So he found another buyer to take over the contract, but the developer refused and kept his deposit.
I have been ruined.
As interest rates rise and the real estate market slows in Canada, realtors say more people are walking away from deposits on pre-sale homes. But it's tough to walk away unscathed.
Never buy without using a lawyer. That would be very foolish. And the fact is that you will have to come up with the money if nothing else happens on the day of closing. You have to be prepared to close.
Pre-sale contracts are complex, and even if developers agree to return a deposit, there's a stiff penalty.
Developers will have experienced counsel draft contracts that maybe make a lot of sense for the developer, maybe not as much wiggle room and towards the buyer.
He says developers can often refuse for any reason. The development company declined an interview, but emailed a statement saying they encouraged Senegal to seek legal advice, calling the situation a private legal matter. Senegal says he can't afford court.
I may have to return back to India, and my Canadian dreams have been ruined and crashed.
He says he just wants his deposit back to try to start his new life in Canada again. Yvette Bren, CBC News, Vancouver.
In Nanaimo, Vancouver Island University has been the backdrop for an international affair on the ice. A week-long tournament has brought together teams from BC, Alberta, even South Korea. As Claire Palmer is finding out, the showcase has drawn hockey fans from across the island and beyond.
The Nanaimo Ice Center is packed. Fans are here to witness good hockey, and the energy is palpable.
I didn't expect the community to embrace this as much as they have. The Korean community has come out to every single game. As you can hear, it's pretty noisy out there.
The showcase features 6 teams. Vancouver Island University is host, along with 2 teams from Alberta, UVic, and the Korean University Tigers. Organizers say the Korean community has come out in droves for the tournament.
A family had come and they were saying they're from Korea, but they moved here for schooling for their children, and they've been inspired to get their children into skating, just skating in general, but the son is pretty adamant he wants to play hockey. So that to me is exciting. And, you know, if we can change one attitude and get them excited about this, that's what it's all about.
The event first started last year in Victoria on a trial run and is now backed by some longtime Nanaimo hockey supporters.
I think finally kind of Canada, and especially here in BC, we're starting to get more and more recognition, and people are getting to see the quality of hockey that's being delivered on the ice here.
Fans have enjoyed the show so far, pledging to return to the rink.
Very impressive.
Yeah.
These guys are playing good hockey.
Really good hockey, lots of passing, fast-paced, and really cool to see a team from out of the country.
Yeah, and to see the enthusiasm of their spectators as well, the Korean players, is pretty cool.
Probably the big hits. Yeah. Korea crushing everybody. Just how fast it is, not the passing. The big hits and like the massive hits in like the zone and stuff.
Many of these players come from a junior hockey background, the high level of play leaving the crowds impressed.
And I think when people have come to watch, they've been blown away with how good this hockey actually is. I don't think they expected it to be this good.
Vancouver Island University is hoping these sold-out crowds and fan support stick around for the rest of their season. Claire Palmer, CBC News, Nanaimo.
A first for some female lacrosse players from across Western Canada this weekend. Athletes descended on Langley to try out for the inaugural Team Canada Female Box Lacrosse.
We're having our Western training camp tryouts for Team Canada Women's National Team. The compete level has been unreal. They all want a spot and they're giving everything they have.
This weekend has just put into perspective how important women's sports are. I'm seeing what I wish I saw when I was younger. You didn't see very many women's lacrosse players. It wasn't broadcast, it wasn't promoted that much. You don't realize that you could dream something like this until all the hard work that gets put into it and now makes it a reality. The next step for this is they make a professional women's box lacrosse league and we start selling out arenas. Sky's the limit, you got it.
Coming up, more on what led to a sudden gaping hole mid-flight on an Alaska Airlines plane this weekend. We'll have the follow-up after the break. Stay with us. In international news, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken's fourth Middle East mission on Gaza visited Qatar and Jordan today. The CBC's Katie Simpson has details of his trip.
Wael al-Dadu reaches for his eldest son's hand one last time. A journalist, just like his dad, the 27-year-old was killed by an Israeli airstrike while traveling by car near Rafah. One other journalist was killed when their vehicle was hit. This family was already in mourning. Al-Dadu lost his wife, another son and daughter, and a grandson, all killed in a separate Israeli airstrike in October. The world must see with their eyes and not with Israel's eyes, he says. It must listen and watch all that is happening to the Palestinian people. The conflict has now entered its fourth month, ignited by Hamas's deadly October 7th attacks on Israel. Israel's military says Hamas is largely defeated in Gaza's north, but concern is growing, the violence is spreading. In the occupied West Bank, 6 people were killed in an Israeli airstrike, launched after an Israeli police officer was killed in what Israel says was a counter-terrorism operation at the Jenin refugee camp. Air raid sirens blared in northern Israel, where the Iranian-backed group Hezbollah says it aimed more than 60 rockets, retaliation, it claims, for the killing of a senior Hamas leader. Israel responded, it says, by targeting Hezbollah's infrastructure in Lebanon, prompting a new warning from the Prime Minister.
אני מציע לחיזבאללה ללמוד את מה שחמאס למד כבר בחודשים האחרונים. אף מחבל אינו חסין, ואנחנו נחושים להגן על אזרחינו.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken will try to use his influence to de-escalate these tensions, arriving in the Middle East for yet another high-level, high-stakes diplomacy mission.
We share a commitment to ensure that the conflict does not expand.
On top of trying to de-escalate tensions, Antony Blinken is also trying to secure the safe passage of more aid into Gaza and trying to re-energize those hostage negotiations. The talks are more complicated now, according to the Prime Minister of Qatar, and that is because of the killing of that senior Hamas leader a few days ago. Families of hostages are growing frustrated, even furious, some of it on display in Tel Aviv with another large demonstration this weekend. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
Elsewhere overseas, Bangladesh saw voter turnout in today's election plummet to half of that recorded in the 2018 ballot. And as expected, the ruling party sailed to victory. After 15 years in power, the current prime minister is set for another term. The main opposition party boycotted this election and was urging a national strike. It wanted the vote overseen by a new neutral authority. Critics accuse the government of authoritarianism, rights violations, and suppressing dissent. Several arson cases in recent days have also been linked to the vote. Stateside, nearly 200 Boeing 737 MAX 9 jets remained grounded today after a panel blew out of one of the jets mid-flight. The plane managed to land with a gaping hole next to an empty seat. But for Boeing, there remains turbulence ahead. The CBC's Caroline Bargu reports.
We are emergency. We are depressurized.
A terrifying moment on board an Alaska Airlines plane.
We have 177 passengers.
After part of the fuselage blew off 16,000 feet in the air. A panel sealing an unused exit suddenly detached.
There was, I guess, a boy and his mother were sitting in that row, and his shirt was sucked off him and out of the plane. And his mother was holding onto him.
No one was sitting in the seats next to the gaping hole. And remarkably, no one was seriously injured.
Had the aircraft been at higher altitude, at cruising altitude, for example, maybe more passengers would have unbuckled their belt, could even have been moving about the cabin, and then certainly there would have been a risk of loss of life with passengers potentially able to be sucked out of the aircraft.
The Federal Aviation Administration has now grounded 171 Boeing 737 MAX 9 planes, most of them being flown by United Airlines and Alaska Airlines. They are not used by Canadian Airlines. The National Transportation Safety Board is investigating. Boeing says it's supporting that work and that safety is its top priority. But passengers are nervous.
Not the most, making me the most confident this morning to get on a flight.
In 2019, Boeing grounded its 737 MAX 8 planes after hundreds died in 2 crashes. Last month, the company urged airlines to inspect more than 1,300 MAX planes for a possible loose bolt in the system that helps maintain cabin pressure.
Boeing has some hard questions to answer. I have confidence that they will answer them fully and truthfully, but the quality assurance issues at Boeing definitely need to be addressed and carefully scrutinized.
This MAX 9 was almost brand new, flying only 145 times since mid-November, only adding to the questions for Boeing to answer. Caroline Bargood, CBC News, Toronto.
Here's a live shot of Burrard Inlet, looking towards the North Shore, and brace for it. Snow could start up in a matter of hours over the south coast. I'll run through all of the weather watches and warnings with the 5-day forecast coming up next.
We're sharing really important information with the public, and I feel like this is exactly what our job is, especially as the public broadcaster, especially in morning radio. That's incredibly important.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox. Enjoy groundbreaking contemporary works of theater, dance, music, and multimedia at the annual Push International Performing Arts Festival, January 19th to February 4th. For the festival program and tickets, visit pushfestival.ca. And never miss a special programming series, event, or contest. Subscribe to CBC Vancouver's e-newsletter at cbc.ca/Vancouver Inbox and keep connected with us.
And time for a look at the 5-day forecast. A very busy couple of days coming up weather-wise. We'll start with our overnight lows for tonight. You can see that precipitation start to fall through the overnight hours all along the coast, from the north, central coast right to the south. Otherwise, it'll be the interior, seeing the bulk of that come through in the next few days following. Here's the system, the spinning low coming in off the Pacific. And here's the challenge. It's bringing some Arctic air, a lot of precipitation, and strong winds as well. That's why this is kind of a triple threat, packing so much punch. So it's going to hit, of course, the coastal sections first and then head inland. And here's how that translates with our 48-hour precipitation forecast. You can see it just sweeps from west to east. And as we see those bluer areas, the accumulation obviously is snow. And in those lower elevations, as we zoom into the coastal areas, possibly rain. So we'll flip back and forth. Snow likely, most likely for Monday morning. Then it might taper off to rain through the afternoon. And then Monday night, we'll see that likely fall as snow again, of course, depending on how high you are up with the elevation. Here's how we're looking where our daytime highs. The mountain passes are expected to get heavy accumulation, so warnings from Drive BC. The province also warning drivers throughout the lower mainland in general to be extra cautious. Slippery conditions as we hover around that zero mark. And here's how we're looking, as we said, Monday, Tuesday, seeing the worst of it. And then we could clear up Wednesday, but we're set to get a lot colder as well towards the end of the work week. So this system is sticking around for quite some time. And that is your late news for this Sunday, January 7th. For news anytime, anywhere, download the free CBC News app. You can always find us online as well. We're at cbc.ca/BC. Your next local newscast is on the early edition. It's on CBC Radio 1 starting tomorrow morning at 5 o'clock. Thank you for watching this weekend. Have a great night.